Hey guys, in today's video, we're going to be using CrewAI and LangGraph to build an email automation tool. This tool is going to connect to our Gmail account, pull down our latest emails that we get, and actually write up draft emails for us to help save us a ton of time. And honestly, I'm shocked that more people aren't using these tools together because the first time I saw this demo actually working, it blew my mind. So let's go ahead and actually hop over so you can see this demo in action because it's going to blow your mind. So let me show you how cool this tool is. So what I've done is I've typed up myself two different example emails. I sent one saying like, hey, what do you think about LangGraph and CrewAI? And then from another email, I sent to myself, hey, would you be interested in doing a sponsorship? So those are just two draft emails. And what this crew has done, which I think you'll find is super cool, it actually analyzed these emails and typed up draft emails. So you can see I have two draft emails waiting to send back to each one of these emails. So you can see for the YouTube collaboration, like, hey, thanks man for the kind words. Could you please provide me more details about the sponsorship, which is like super cool. I didn't type any of that up. Same thing for this LangGraph email. It went ahead and said, thanks for asking about my thoughts. And it just continues to carry the conversation so I can quickly respond back to the people who are sending messages to me. And as you can see back in here over in the code, we have our crew going through and it's going to analyze all of our emails, pull out the latest ones to make sure we're not responding to junk or email promotions. It's going to pull out emails from real people, go in there, analyze the text, and actually generate responses. So that's what's happening inside of our crew. So I hope you guys are pumped to start building this. And per usual, I'll have the source code down below for free. And this is actually an example pulled from the CrewAI tools demo, but I'm just gonna be walking you guys through it line by line. So if you want to level up as a CrewAI developer and not fall behind, you're definitely gonna wanna watch this video the whole way through. Also, real quick, I want to mention I created a free Skool community just for you guys. It's called the AI Developer Accelerator. So if you get stuck at all during this tutorial and run into any questions, feel free to hop over there and ask your questions. I'll answer it, or someone else in the community will be sure to get you unstuck so you can keep building out your awesome crews. And I also want to mention you're going to meet a ton of other like-minded AI developers over there from all different skill levels. So you're definitely going to want to check it out right after this video. But enough of that, let's go ahead and dive into the video. All right, so here's a roadmap of what we're going to be covering in this video. First, we're going to be talking about what is LangGraph. Then we're going to be talking about why you would want to combine LangGraph and CrewAI together. And from there, we're finally going to actually dive into the code where we're going to start building out that email automation tool where we're combining the LangGraph and CrewAI together. So let's go ahead and dive into the first part where we're going to talk about what is LangGraph. So the main reason you would want to use LangGraph with CrewAI is because LangGraph allows you to intelligently kick off your crew when certain conditions are met. So let's actually dive into a few concrete examples with this diagram so you can see how powerful this tool is. So what I've done is I've created a super simple diagram inside of here with LangGraph. We have a few different actions such as wait 30 seconds and kick off our crew. And then we have a condition where we're just going to check here in a few seconds for like, did condition get met? Yes, great, go kick off the crew. If no, all right, cool, just go back and wait. So let's look at two different examples just so you can see this in action. Let's imagine we were building some sort of stock analysis tool. And what we would do with this stock analysis tool is give buy or sell recommendations and some justification for why we recommend that. Well, instead of you and I manually kicking off our crew every time we want to do this report, we could actually have this crew respond to market conditions. So for example, let's say we were monitoring the price of Apple. It went up 5%. Well, we could have this condition check to see, hey, was there a large increase in the price of the stock? If yes, cool, let's go kick off our financial analysis crew to go analyze what's happening inside of that stock, write a report for why we think it's happening, and then suggest a buy or sell alert. Oh, if it hasn't met this condition, cool, we'll just go back and wait until something does happen interesting in the stock market, which is super cool because this means you and I get to build tools that we just set them running and then forget it because they're just going to be running in the background. Or we could have something else, like imagine we were doing some sort of like newsletter. What we could do is basically build a real-time newsletter. So let's just say imagine we were tracking what Elon Musk was saying on X. We could say the condition could be, has Elon tweeted something new? Great. If so, let's kick off our newsletter crew that's going to go off and write a newsletter and send it out to all of our subscribers or put it in our draft. And we're just going to quickly comment on his latest tweet, what we think it means and our thoughts about it. And we could do whatever we want really. And that's the cool part. And once again, if he hasn't sent out any tweets, great. We're just going to go back and wait for 30 seconds. So I hope you see how this kind of actually sets up in this super simple example. We're going to be doing something exactly like this because we're going to be building our email automation service where we're going to be waiting and just looking at our email inbox, we're going to check to see if we have new emails. If so, we're going to go write our draft email. So this is the exact same flow that we're going to be building out here in just a few seconds. So I hope all the dots are starting to click now that you've kind of seen a little bit of what LangGraph can do in these super simple examples. But let's go ahead and actually start heading over to the code where we're actually going to be building everything up, and we're actually going to start coding out and setting up LangGraph inside of our application. And that's where we're actually going to dive into the nitty-gritties where you'll learn about setting up nodes, edges, and state. But all of that will make more sense once we dive over to the code. So let's go ahead and hop over. So now we're going to dive into the fun part where we're actually going to start coding up this project. And just to help paint a roadmap of what we're about to do next, first, we're just going to walk through all the files at a high level just so you understand what's inside of this project. From there, we're going to dive deep into LangGraph, really looking at the 3 different files that really set up LangGraph, which are going to be our graph, nodes, and state.py files. And we're also going to really dive into the core fundamental technologies and terms that you use to set up your LangGraph. Then from there, we're going to hop back up and start talking about our crew, just so you understand what it's trying to do. And then finally, what we're going to do is we're going to go off and actually start setting up connecting up our Gmail account over to our local crew. That way we can actually have our crew pull down some emails and write those draft emails that you saw in the demo at the beginning of the video. Okay, so let's go ahead and start diving into each one of these files at a super high level just so we're on the same page. And right after that, we're gonna hop over to our LangGraph files. Okay, so at the top, what you'll notice inside of our source directory file, we have pretty much the normal stuff that you would expect to see. We're gonna have our main.py. This is where we're gonna kick off our LangGraph and we're gonna kick off our crew. From there, you're gonna notice we have this thing called a credentials file. You're gonna make that in a little bit at the end of the video, and that's gonna store all of your sensitive information for actually connecting your crew to Gmail. And then a few other things that you'll notice is we have our requirements file. This is where we're actually gonna go over and pull down and set up all of our dependencies to basically create our Python environment to run this tool. And let's look a deeper dive into the actual code itself. So going into the LangGraph side of things, you'll notice there's a graph. And the graph is basically, we'll dive into this in a minute, but basically this is going to contain all of the nodes and edges inside of our graph. Don't worry if that doesn't make sense, we're gonna dive into that later. And then from there, we're gonna be able to set up each one of those nodes. So a node, this is where we're gonna actually perform actions and do things at each different state. Don't worry, this will all make sense. I'm dropping seeds. So later on when we come back to them, you'll understand, oh yeah, we did talk about this. And then finally, we're going to go about setting state. This is just basically, we're just trying to remember the state of things inside of our graph. So that's what's happening on the LangGraph side of things. And then if you're more familiar with CrewAI, you'll be pretty familiar with a lot of these tools. So first off, we're gonna set up our crew, and our crew is going to be contained a bunch of different agents, and it's going to contain a bunch of different tasks. So this should look pretty familiar to you if you've worked on crew projects in the past. If not, don't worry, I have a ton of other CrewAI related tutorials on this channel, and I'll probably pop up a card in the corner so you can watch some of the foundational videos and then also watch some of the more advanced videos just so you can really get your feet wet and start actually experimenting with this tool. This is all very basic stuff, and you can actually see, per usual, we're going to set up our agents to do certain things such as filter emails, actions, and write responses. And then each one of those agents is going to be given tasks that pretty much have the same name. And outside of that, we're going to do some fancy tools, which is going to be creating a draft. And that's where we're going to have our crew create a draft email. Okay, cool. So now that you understand everything that's happening at a high level inside of this project, now let's really go ahead and dive deep into LangGraph so we can really start talking about some of the core terminology and to make you a graph professional. So let's go ahead and start working on that now. All right, so now we're gonna dive into setting up LangGraph, and I've actually set up a ton of visuals to make this super easy for you to understand and to grasp how everything connects. But before we dive into that, I just wanna take a quick tangent and just let you know that building graphs, which is what we're about to do right now, is super foundational to becoming a software developer. If you went to college to learn software development or computer science, basically you would learn in data structures and algorithms, you would learn about graph theory. But we're going to throw all that out the window and just learn a super basic version of it for this demo right here. And I'm pumped for you guys to get to learn this because once you kind of understand graph theory, your mind opens up to understanding a bunch of different problems that you might not have already had like a tool to solve. So we're basically we're adding a new tool to our tool belt. So we're going to become a better developer and more specifically a better AI developer. So let's go ahead and start diving in and setting up our LangGraph. So when you begin to work with LangGraph, there are 4 different terms that you need to know. The first one is going to be nodes, and think of nodes as different actions that we want to take. The next term is going to be state. State is nothing more than the ability for us to memorize what we have done in the past. So how many emails have we sent? What emails have we checked? Which draft emails have we written up? So that's what state's for, is to help us to remember what we've done in the past. And the next two terms that you need to know are edges. So think as edges as a connection between two nodes. And you'll see this in just a second, but just edge, remember that is a connection between two nodes to say, can node 1 talk to node 2? So that's what that's for. And the final term that you need to know is graph. And a graph is nothing more than just a collection of nodes and edges. Cool. You now know all the terms for a LangGraph. So, hey, you've already done 80% of the work in learning it. So now let's actually hop over and see what this looks like when you actually visualize these new terms. So welcome to my beautiful Excalibur drawing. And I just want to show you all of the new terms that you just learned. So right now, what you're looking at inside of this is a graph. We have nodes and edges. So that's term 1. It's a collection of nodes and edges. Now, what is our nodes? Well, if you remember, we said our nodes are different actions that we want to perform. So let's actually hop back to our code so we can visualize these side by side. I want you to get to the point when you look at these files, you can almost visualize one of these graphs right here. So I'm helping you become a graph visualizer. Okay, so let's look at the different actions that we can take with our nodes. Well, the first one is we can go check emails to see which emails we have out there. Then we can wait for the next run. So, we want to check emails, then wait a minute or two because, emails aren't coming in every second. And then the third action we want to perform is new emails. So that's what our 3 different nodes could be. We could say, hey, go check your emails. We have another node for waiting, and then we could have another node for writing up our draft emails. So those are the potential actions that we could take. Okay, so where LangGraph comes in is, and where all the magic happens, is we can say how we can move between these different nodes. So for example, imagine we just checked for emails. Well, after we check for emails, we might want to write an email. We might just want to wait if we didn't find any new emails. So that's actually where edges come in. So let's hop back over to our graph so you can see where our different edges get added. So we can see after we draft a response, we'll dive back over here. So the 3 different nodes we can have are check new email. So these are the 3 different actions. And now we can say, okay, well, how can I move between each one of these actions? And the way we move between nodes is through edges. So node 1 connects to node 2. Or node 2 connects to node 3, and you can see this one's a 2-way, so it's a bi-directional edge. So that's you're learning. So this is one direction, unidirectional, or back and forth, bi-directional. You are becoming an official developer. This is awesome. That's what's happening with our edges. We are setting up the movement between all of our nodes. So let's actually go ahead and translate what we're seeing in here to our actual code. So we can see we want to add an edge between draft responses and wait for the next email. So we said draft response to wait to the next email. This one we need to set up to go from left to right, from draft to wait. The next one is we want to go from wait to check emails. So we're going to go this way this time. We're going to go from wait to check emails. Fantastic. So as you can see, we're starting to build up a flow between all of our different nodes. And then what we can do in addition to that is there's this thing called additional conditional edges. So this is where we want to check. So like, hey, did something happen? Great. In that case, I want this node to connect to this node. And if you actually hover over it, you can see, so what is the starting key? So in our case, this is the starting node. And then if it worked out, well, what do we want to have happen next? So in our case, we want to do at check new emails. We want to see if at the check node emails node, we want to check to see if we have emails. So this is a Boolean. So if we do have new emails, great. We're going to go draft a response. If not, we're going to go to wait to next run. So it's kind of like a decision tree. So, hey, do we have new emails? If we do, great. Go write a response for them. If not, we'll just wait to the next run. So let's visualize that now that we know we can add this edge. More specifically, a conditional edge. So we agreed at check new emails is the starting point right up here. What we're going to do is have 2 different types of responses that are conditional. First one is draft responses. So we'll make this one conditional so you can kind of see what's going to happen. Fantastic. So this is if we have emails to respond to. Fantastic. And then the next one, after we've checked new emails, if we don't have any new emails, well, what do we need to do? We need to wait if no new emails. All right, cool. So what's interesting is this, what you're looking at right here, this entire graph is exactly what this is right here. We have turned our text into an actual visual. So I hope you guys are getting the hang of understanding, oh, that's what a node is. That's what an edge is. Oh, this is what a graph is. It's just a collection of nodes and edges. Okay, now let's dive into the final part of it, which is going to be state. And if you remember, state is our ability to remember what's happening inside of our graph. So let's actually dive back over to our code and understand what was going on. So we said there was 3 different things that we wanted to remember. Checked email IDs. So, hey, have we seen this email in the past? The next one is just going to be emails. So these are all the emails that we have. And then the last one is going to be action required emails. So, oh, we need to perform an action on this email, such as writing a draft or something like that. Okay, so that's the final thing that's going to happen. And what's interesting is each one of these nodes can update our memory. So, whenever we check a new email, well, what do we want to do? We want to add those new emails to our memory. Oh, I just drafted a response. Okay, cool. I no longer need to write a draft. I need to update our memory to go, yep, this one, check. We have written an email, so we no longer need to act on it anymore. So I hope this is all clicked. I would definitely recommend watching this part twice because there was a lot of new concepts. But once you basically have added this tool to your tool belt and have fully understand how to go from one of these graph.py files over to a visual, you'll kind of understand, oh yeah, that is how everything connects. And honestly, I'm a big fan. Whenever I'm building one of these projects, I will start with the visual first, and then I'll translate it over to code. So if I was building this project, I would have built this first, and then I would have coded up all of this over here. So I hope that has a big help as you go off and build your own crews. Okay, so now that we've done everything at a high level with working with LangGraph, what I want to do next is actually dive deep into setting up the nodes, and so you can fully understand what's happening inside of each one of these action steps, because this is where our nodes are going to start updating our memory. So let's go ahead and start diving into this. All right, so let's go ahead and look at each one of these nodes and see what actions they were going to perform. I'm not going to go super deep into coding all this up because it's super straightforward when you actually read the code. The main thing is I just want to help show you how our nodes connect to our state, because I want you to understand the core fundamental things that we're working on. So when you're off building your own LangGraph and CrewAI tools, you'll have a core understanding of like, oh, that's why we were doing it, and that's how everything connected up. And to help visualize what's going on, I went ahead and actually typed up some like additional and updated our visualizing our diagram, so you can see like here are our nodes and here's our state. This way, as we go off and run through our code over here, we can hop back and forth and understand, yep, that's how everything connects, because that's the important part of this. Okay, so we're going to speed mode through the first one, which is going to be checking our emails. So if you remember, what are we trying to do? We are trying to look at emails inside of our inbox because we want the ability to respond to them. So what do we need to do? Well, first off, we need to import all of our Gmail tools, because that's how we're going to connect to our Gmail. What we're doing is setting it up, our Gmail tools, and then the important part is we're setting up our custom instance of starting to search through our inbox. Now, how the heck does this actually connect over to our Gmail? Well, great question. The first one is we went over this in the later part of the video, but we need to pull down our Gmail credentials. So that file is a super secret file, which actually includes all of the pieces necessary for these tools to connect over to our Gmail account. So that's what's happening here. Now let's dive into the parts that we actually have control over and how they interact with our state. So the first one is we can actually update the search parameters and search for different things inside of our Gmail account. So we could look for all emails that are basically 1 day old. So that's what that means. Or we can actually do something like from Brandon9598. So you can actually search from a previous certain sender. And there's a bunch of different things that you can do. I would just look up the Google Docs for Gmail and actually see what are all the different custom queries you can do. All right, so what we need to do next. This is where we're going to start getting a little bit deeper into working in Python code. So I'm going to try and make this as simple as possible. The important part is we need to look through all the emails that we've previously looked at, because if we've already looked at those emails, there's no reason to look at them again. So that's exactly what this is doing. So we're going to do a ternary to say, hey, I want to look at my checked email IDs state. Does it exist? Great. Give me all the items inside of it. Oh, if it doesn't, just give me back an empty list. That's exactly what that means. So over here, just to show you, if this list said, hey, we looked at email 12345, we would actually just return that email IDs of 12345. So that's exactly what's happening here. Now, what do we do next? We need to iterate through all of the emails that we got back from our query and start adding them to our list to check out. Because, if they're a new email that we haven't looked at before, well, we want to store that email so that we can later on, type up a response to it, because that's our end goal. So that's what we're going to do in this for loop here. We're going to go through each one of our new emails, and emails can be chained together in a thread. So that's why you're going to see this term thread. So let's walk through it. So we're going to iterate through each one of our emails. And if this email was already contained in our checked emails list, skip it because we don't want to look at it. And if this thread ID is not in the thread, meaning we're looking at a completely new thread, and does the sender of this email not equal my email? Well, where did this my email come from? Well, if you go over to your .env file, you'll have the ability to come in here and update, your email. And you'll also have the ability to update your other environment variable keys, but more on that later. The important part is you need to keep this file very safe, but we'll talk about how to do that later. The final part of this, just to recap, hey, is this a new email? Did this email not already exist in an existing thread? Great. Also, was my email not the sender of this email? And all this means is we're just trying to check like, hey dude, I don't want to respond to emails that I sent. I obviously only want to respond to emails that people have sent me. So if we meet those 3 criteria, we're going to go off and start building up our list that we have right here. So we're going to add the new email thread ID over here. That's what the append's going to do. And the next thing is we're going to actually store the key pieces of information we need about each email so that we can later respond to them, such as the ID, the thread ID, a snippet. So this is just like a quick text blurb of like what was said in that email, and then who sent the email. So we want to know their email address. After we've gone through that for each one of the emails that we've just searched through in our for loop, we want to do the 2 things. We want to update our email list inside of our state, and we also want to update our checked emails ID or list inside of our state. What does this even mean? Because I know this can be very overwhelming, especially for newer software developers, because you're like, what the heck does this double star mean? And I'm adding stuff after the double stars. Like, what does this mean? Okay, so the best way I like to think of it is this double star just expands whatever your current state is. So if our current state, I'm gonna do a split screen so you guys can actually see this line by line. So here's what our current state would look like, because our state is getting passed around. You'll see how we passed in state right here. Our state is gonna get passed around between all of our nodes because each of our node needs the ability to look at the current state and edit it. So that's why we're having to pass it around everywhere. What we're gonna do is this state really means, this. So I'm gonna comment it out so you can kind of see what actually it means. So checked email, copy this a few more times, and perfect. So this is actually what that double star syntax means. It's just a quick shorthand so you don't have to type it out. But it's basically saying, hey, expand out my current state. Oh, I actually messed up because I should have put these to the side too. My bad. I'll do this real fast just so you guys can see everything in action. And then the next would be emails. And then the final one would be the action state. So this is exactly what this represents. It's our current state. So it's, well, what is our state? Well, it's these 3 things: our checked emails, and actions required. So we've expanded them all out with our shorthand. Well, why is this helpful? Well, because in this check email function, where we're checking to find new emails, we are responsible for updating new emails we find and updating any checked email IDs. So that way in the future we can skip having to check emails if we already found them. So if the keywords in there is I'm responsible for updating it. Well, that's exactly what our code's going to do. Our code right here is going to override existing state. So this email parameter right here, property, is going to override this one. So I'll just go ahead and delete that. And this checked emails new property is going to override the existing one. So basically the important part is anything that has, since these have the same property name, the one that comes at the end is going to overwrite the one that's the previous ones. So later will always overwrite previous. What's cool is we are going to end up with something like this, where we have strictly updated the 2 properties we wanted to, the emailed and checked email IDs, and we have completely left alone the action required email state. So that's why it's so nice, because with just doing this right here, we have updated state for the 2 things we wanted to change and completely left alone the other part of our state that we're just putting it to the side and gonna pass it along later on when we need to use it later. So that's why this is a super quick, nice shortcut for updating state. And you can see, what are we doing? Well, we're returning this updated state. So that was definitely a lot, but note this is a very common practice inside of programming. So if you have any questions, once again, please drop them below or add them over to Skool. But I'll definitely watch this part at least twice because this is super fundamental for updating and sharing state throughout our application. Let's keep chugging along to the two other short parts of our nodes. So the other one is just wait for next run. Basically what this means is like whenever I hit this part of our node, well, what do you want to do? I just want to go to bed for 30 seconds. So that's what's going to happen. And after we wait for 30 seconds, we're just going to return the state that was passed to us. Hopefully you can start to see a pattern here to where we take in state, we update it, or we don't do anything. We might just reference it and give it back. So that's how we're sharing state between all of our nodes. And the final one is whenever we're going to be working with new emails. Well, this is really just a Boolean. Because if you remember back over here on our graph, whenever we were doing our conditional edge checks, we're at this node, and based on if our condition is a true or false, we want to do two things. If it's a true, go over here. If it's a false, do this. I hope this is starting to make sense. These are really the two important nodes that you needed to know about: the check email and the wait to next run. And the third one that you'll notice in the graph that wasn't referenced right here was draft response. So now we have gone through the nodes. Now we're going to start connecting things in our graph. And this is where things are getting interesting because this is where LangGraph and CrewAI merge. And it happens right here on these lines. So let's go ahead now and start diving through our graph.py file and walk through it line by line so you guys will have a better understanding of how this all connects. So the first thing that's important to notice is inside of this graph, what we're doing is first, we're importing everything that we set up previously. So you can see up top from our state, we are importing our email state. So that's what we're importing right here. And then you can also see that we are setting up our nodes from our nodes.py file. So we're bringing all of our nodes and state over because now that we have everything that we need to set up our graph, we can start setting it up down here. And the other important thing is we also have the ability to import our crew, and we're just importing that from, if you look inside of our crew.crew file, so we're bringing in this email filter crew into our workflow and basically inside of our graph. Okay, so we're bringing in everything. Now it's up to us to connect it all together. So here's exactly what we're going to be doing. So the first thing is we, inside of our workflow, because that's how LangGraph works, is it's a workflow that allows us to direct how our application flows and passes around and manages state inside of the graph. Okay, so what's actually happening? Well, right out the gate, we need to define all of the nodes inside of this graph. So even though we've created them over here in this file, we need to add them to the graph. And it's super simple to do that. So we make a new node type, and then what we do is we come over here and we start making a workflow. And a workflow is nothing more than a connection of nodes, edges, and state. So that's exactly what's happening here. So you'll see we're to check that state box whenever we create our state graph, which is coming from LangGraph. You can see we're saying this is the state I need you to keep track of. So that's why we're doing that. So we've checked off state. Now we just need to add in nodes and edges. And that's what we're going to do right inside of here. Inside of our workflow, we're going to add a node saying our check news email node. Well, that's the key. Well, what's the value? Well, it's a node, and it's going to be our check email node that we set over here. You'll notice right now that all of these are just functions that they don't even take an input except the state, and then they just return an updated state. So that's what's expected. It's up to us to say, if you look at an add node, the actual what's happening inside of here, what you'll notice is it's actually just taking in a key, and then it's going to take in something called a runnable like, and all that means is like, hey, we need to run the node. We said nodes are actions. Highlighting over that, what we're trying to do is we're creating all of our nodes and giving them names. So here's the name, here's the action that we already set up. Here's the name of the node, here's the action we already set up, and here's the new node that we haven't talked about yet, our draft responses node. Well, what does this node need to do? Well, it actually needs to go off and kick off a crew. And we're going to dive into CrewAI in just a second, but I just want to fully paint the picture of like, yep, this node has a name of draft responses, and its action is to go off and run an entire crew that we're going to build in 2 seconds. Awesome. The final thing that's important inside of here that we haven't got to fully talk about is like, okay, we now have a beautiful graph like this, and we know how we're updating state as we run through all of our different nodes because our nodes are performing actions and updating this state. Where do we start in this graph? Well, that's something we have to define inside of our application. So we say, hey, the starting point is check new emails. So let's go ahead and give ourselves a new, I think just like a nice starting point, or starting here. So I'll just put start. This is where we're going to start. And then finally, what we have to do is add in those conditional edges that we talked about earlier. We've already shown how to add in those lines right here. And just as a final thing, hey, whenever we run this node, we have two options that can happen afterwards. The first one is, did we get new emails? Great. If we did, continue to the next step. If not, you're done, buddy. Just end. And what does end mean? It means just go over here and wait 30 seconds to the next run. Okay, cool. And then outside of that, edges, the main thing to think about edges, these are just communication channels that we allow to flow between. The important part about LangGraph is we are very strict in the way flows can happen. So that's what's happening here. And then finally, we're just compiling this workflow into an application that we can then later kick off. Well, where do we kick it off, you might ask? Well, if you hop back over to our file explorer and go to our main.py, you'll notice that's exactly what we do here. We import our graph that we just created that contains the entire state, flow, how everything's moving around. And then we just say, great, here's the app, and let's go ahead and kick it off. And you just kick it off with invoke. And if you wanted to, you could pass in additional inputs right here. But we're not going to do that. All we're trying to do is just go off and kick off our graph that we just set up. I hope you understand LangGraph now, because we've talked about all the core principles. You now know how nodes, edges, starting points, conditional edges. You now have a full grasp of that. So we're going to put LangGraph to the side now. And what we're going to do is hop over to CrewAI and start actually investigating what the heck is happening inside of this email filter crew, and how does it correspond to our actual state that we were setting up and using throughout the rest of this process. So let's go ahead and start hopping over here and start analyzing our crew. So we're going to speed mode through this part because we've already set up a bunch of different crews, but I just want to really hone in and focus on the parts that are super specific to the overlap of CrewAI and LangGraph, because that's where the important part is. So let's dive into the important things. So per usual, when we set up a crew, the first thing that you really want to do is set up your agents, tasks, and tools. Let's actually dive into each one of these. Whenever we create our crew, the first thing we do inside of our constructor is make all of our different agents. So if we hop over here to our email agents file, you can see that we have set up our 3 different agents: our filter agent, our email action agent, and our email response writer. So let's actually dive into each one of these and talk about the core purpose behind each one of these agents and see how they relate to one another. Inside of this email agent file, you'll see, once again, we are importing our Gmail toolkit because we want to give our crew the ability to go off and actually write draft emails. So that's why we're importing this tool. The first one that we want to do is whenever we kick off our crew, is we want to let our filter agent go off and filter out the non-essential emails like newsletters and promotions, because once again, we only want to respond to real emails that people have sent us. And we are going to not allow this agent to go off and delegate work to other agents. It's, hey, here's all the emails that you got, and we'll talk about state here in a second, but I need you to look at all the emails you got inside of the state variable that we're passing it around, and look in there and find all the emails and filter out everything that looks like junk, and only give me the emails that look like we need to respond to. And I think the best way to actually look at this is to go off and look at the task that corresponds to this agent as well, just so we can do a side-by-side, because that's exactly, if you come down here to the kickoff part, you can actually see that's what we're doing here. We're creating those agents, and then we're connecting each one of those agents to a task. So we're looking at the filter agent, and we can see the filter agent is used inside of the filter email task. So let's go ahead and dive into the task. But the thing that I think you'll find very interesting is like, hey man, we were this whole time working with state. Well, how does state get involved in this crew? Well, it happens right here. Whenever we set up our crew and we give ourselves a task, you'll notice that our email task takes in 2 things. It takes in the agent who's going to filter our emails, and then it takes in the list of emails that we need to analyze. So that's exactly what's happening right here. You can see we're looking at the state variable that we're passing around, and we're looking at the emails key. And that emails key is just going to give us back all the different emails, the IDs, and that snippets that we had set up previously inside of our other node where we were checking new emails. So it's all coming together, and we're passing down the emails so we can filter through them. Let's go ahead and start looking through our task where we can actually see what's happening inside of this filter email. Well, hey dude, analyze a batch of emails. Take out the promotions. I don't want to worry about those. It's your job to only give me the actual emails that are directed to the users. And here is your list of emails. So Zhao did a phenomenal job of formatting this task to where it's very clear. He did a great job delineating between, here's the prompt and here's the dynamic information that I'm going to pass into you. So it'll be very clear and easy for the crew to read. And you can see here, this is where we're passing in our emails. And then we give a final piece of information of saying, hey, your final answer must include basically the relevant thread IDs and the center, and use bulleted list. That's how that is set up. So now what we can do after we have set up and filtered out all of our emails and know who we need to respond to, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next task and agent, which is going to be our email action agent. And this one is going to be super straightforward. The important part here is we need to compile a list of emails that we need to start responding to. Did this email that was sent to us, does it require action on our endpoint? Great. If it does, this agent is going to determine that and set us up for actually responding to it. So let's go ahead and look at the corresponding task for it. So if we scroll down, you'll notice the action required email task. We're not passing any variables here because our crew is working together. So at this point, what it's going to do is say, for each email thread, I want you to pull and analyze the complete thread using only the actual thread ID. And you're at this point going to have the context and understand the entire sentiment of the conversation. So it's really up to you to basically do the following. I want you to, for each one of those emails, to list out the thread ID, a summary of the email, give me the main points, who's talking, make sure you identify the communication style, and who I need to send the address to. Just at a high level, because that was kind of a lot, what we're doing is we're pulling out all the information and really preparing ourselves to go off and write the email, because that's the next step. We're going to draft our response. So all we're doing is say, we filtered out all the junk. Now that we're looking at real emails, we're just trying to say like, okay, well, what do I need to do for each one of these emails? Just make it a nice bulleted list of what action I need to perform on those emails. And the final step is going to be going off and drafting a response based on the information we're putting together right here. I hope that makes sense. All right, so then now we can go to the final part of our crew, which is going to be our writer agent. At this point, let's go ahead and head over to our writer agent so you can actually see what it's trying to do. And the main thing, per usual, is we're going to set up all the roles, goals, backstory. So, hey, you're just a skilled writer. You're going to go off and write emails. But what's different about this one is the fact that we tell it that you have 3 tools to use. So let me show you what each one of these is so that you can actually kind of understand what's going on. And I do think it's important at the same time. We'll dive into the task in a second. The main thing is, hey, this agent has the ability to access basically the internet. Tavily, probably pronouncing that wrong, is basically just a API that makes it super easy for large language models to go off and search the internet. So you have to go off and get an API key, and we'll do that in just a second. But so hey, this email person has the ability to go off and search the internet to maybe get some additional information about email that they're about to write. Outside of that, it needs the ability to go off and pull more information and reanalyze the emails. So that's what that tool is going to do. Go off and reread the entire email list in case you need any missing information. And then finally, you need the ability to go off and actually basically write an email. And this is something that we have created, because if you look in the create draft tool, this is something we imported from our tools folder. So if I hop over here to our tools folder, you'll see that, yep, right here, we use the tool decorator on this function to say, hey, this is your ability. You can use this function right here to make emails. So, well, what does it do? It takes in information, and specifically it takes in the email, the subject, and the message. So the email of the person we're trying to send it to, or multiple people, the subject of the email, and the actual body of the message. And per usual, we're going to be using the toolkit to go off and create a draft email. And we're just going to call the draft function to create the draft with all the information that we passed into the tool. All right, cool. So you're now a pro on the email writer agent. Well, what does this actual task look like? What are we telling this agent to do? If we come down here to the end, I think Zhao did a phenomenal job of creating this task. What it's going to do is it's going to write a draft email. But the important part is, how do we convey that information and goal to our agent? Based on the action required emails identified, so everything that came from the agent above, the task above, I want you to draft responses for each one of them, ensuring that you meet all the following criteria. And I'm not going to go into a ton of detail here, but like, hey, go off and research the topic. So that was what Tavily was for. Go off and Google more about this topic if you need to. Oh, also, do you not have all the information that you think you need in order to respond to this email? Well, feel free to pull down the thread again. And that's exactly why we had our get thread tool again. So we're giving our agent all the tools it needs to perform this task. Go research this. Go find out more about this. And once you're ready to go, now it's time for you to write it. So that's what this final part is. Now, finally use the tool provided to go off and write an email. And it's important that you need to include the following information. The to, so who's the email we're sending it to, the subject line, and the message. That's how this all connects, and this all gets kicked off actually inside of our crew. So if we come back over to our crew, you can see they all get connected right here. Each one of our tasks gets connected to an agent. And then finally, what we're gonna do, tying it all full circle back to LangGraph. If you remember, whenever we were creating our graph, well, what does our graph usually do? Well, our node performs an action and it updates state. Well, that's exactly what our crew is going to do down here at the very end. Once we kick off our crew with all of our tasks and agents included in it, once we kick off the crew and it takes a few minutes to run, what we're going to do with that result is we're, per usual, going to go update the state. This time we're not updating emails or checked emails. We're actually updating the action required emails. So these are the emails that we performed actions on. In this case, we wrote up a draft email. So that's exactly what's happening inside of here. So I hope this has all made sense in how you've seen how everything is connected, where we're updating state, writing emails, and moving throughout our graph, basically. And the part that's interesting is because what do we do after we finish drafting response? Well, you can guess it. Our edge tells us go back and wait. And the cycle is going to kick off once again. So we're going to go back to our wait node, and they're just going to redo the cycle over and over and over again. So I hope you guys have seen the power of how all this connects. And I know we've been doing a lot of talking and we haven't actually got to set up and run it. So what I want to do next is walk you guys through the actual process of going through the README. And inside of here, I'm going to show you guys how to set up your environment. We're going to quickly connect up your crew to Gmail, so that we're going to go pull down your credentials. We're going to set up basically everything that you need to and turn on everything inside of Google so that your crew has access. And after that, we're going to go ahead and run it. So let's go ahead now and hop over to Google so we can start pulling down your credentials. All right, so what I've done so far is I've clicked this link which says follow these Google instructions to set up your authentication credentials for a desktop application, because that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to build a CrewAI that runs on our local desktop. So when you click that link, it'll take you over to this page right here, which will call out all the instructions and steps you need to take in order to pull down your credentials.json. And the important thing to note is you're trying to generate an OAuth 2.0 client ID. That's the goal. And these steps right here show you exactly how to do it. So what you do first is go off and click your Go to Credentials button. And what this will do is it'll take you to a screen that looks just like this. Now, it's super important to notice this is inside of Google Cloud Platform. If you haven't already signed up to use Google Cloud Platform, it's completely free to use. I would definitely just recommend signing up and signing in so that you can see your dashboard just like this. The next thing you need to do is create a new project. So right now mine says CrewAI Automations. If yours says new project, don't worry, just click the drop down. It'll prompt you to make a new project, and just be sure to go ahead and call it CrewAI something, just so you'll have an easy way to remember which project you were working on. Fantastic. So once you have your environment set up to where it shows that you're logged in and you're inside of a CrewAI project, you will now start going over here to the credentials window that you're looking at right now. And the important thing to note is we said our goal was to set up an OAuth 2.0 client ID. And since I've obviously been running my crew locally, I already have one of these client IDs, but I'm going to show you how to do it. So the first thing you're going to do is click Create Credentials up top, and then it's going to ask you which kind. Well, in our case, we want to do an OAuth client. From there, it's going to ask us which application type we would like to use. And back in our instructions, it says we want to make a desktop application. So click that, and then we're going to give ours a name. So we're just going to call ours, I'm just going to call mine YouTube, CrewAI, and then LangGraph. So it can take a few minutes to actually go ahead and create these credentials. But the important thing is it will come up with this screen. Now, make sure, don't exit out of it. The thing that you need to do is download the JSON, because when you download this JSON file, this is the file that you actually need to go ahead and import inside of your local project directory. And just as a recap, this is super important to use, and you don't want to share this with the world. So how do you go about not sharing this file with the world? The first thing you need to do is make sure whenever you drag it over, you need to make sure that your .getignore file includes the name of this JSON file, because we don't want to be sharing it with the world. I cannot repeat this enough. Do not accidentally save this to GitHub, because you don't want to save your key to the world so anyone can start actually pulling down your emails, because that's a big no-no. So make sure whenever you do pull it down, that it says you have updated your .getignore to say, hey, I do not want to save our credentials. Okay, so we have downloaded our file. So what I can do is if I go ahead and hover over our downloads, so I can see my recent download called Client Secret 7456. So let me go ahead and find that in my downloads real fast. So I'm just gonna go ahead and drag in my client's secret over here. So you can see that there's just a part of it. So what I'll do is close out of that. But the important thing is you'll notice my client secret, it's not the right name. So what you'll need to do is click this file, and then you'll need to rename it. I'm gonna go ahead and delete my old one, move it to the trash, and you need to rename this one your credentials.json, just like that. Perfect. So now you have your credentials.json saved to your file. Now there's one other step that we need to take over in Google, and this wasn't called out in the original README. I had to update it. But if you type in the Gmail API, you'll need to type that in, and eventually you'll want to click this right here. And what you need to do is you need to enable this in order for your local credentials to have access, or basically this project, you want this project to have access to the Gmail API, because that's how we were pulling down emails and writing up drafts. So make sure you enable it. And once you've done that, you are all good on the Google front. What we're going to do next is keep chugging along, and we're going to go back over to our .env file because we need to do some homework. The next one is we need to update your email address. So go ahead inside your .env file, update your email address to whatever you were using inside of your, whatever account you're connecting it to. And then from there, you and I are going to go update and create a Tavily API key. So what are we going to do for this one? Well, we're going to go to tavily.com, and we are going to go ahead. This is completely free to use. They have a super generous pricing. So you can see if you look at this, if you're free, you get up to 1,000 calls per month. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I've already signed in. So you can see, yeah, I've already signed in. If you haven't, sign up, completely free. And what you'll do is you'll get brought to a page that looks just like this, where you'll have access to your API key. So you're going to want to click the copy button and then come back over to your .env file and paste it in here so you can start allowing your crew to go off and access the internet in an intelligent way. If you don't want to use Tavily, feel free to use Serper, or if you want to get fancy and try something else, you can use DuckDuckGo or whatever search tool that you like when working with your crews. All right, cool. And the final thing, you know how to do it at this point. You're going to go over and update your OpenAI key inside of OpenAI. Just generate a new key, save it here. Awesome. So once we've done that, we're in the home stretch, boys. What we're going to do next is we have one or two more final things that we need to do. And one of them is actually going to be setting up our local environment that will be able to run this crew. So what we're going to do is we're going to hop back over to our terminal, set up our crew with all the requirements so we can kick this thing off. All right, so welcome to the terminal. This is where we're going to install all of our Python dependencies, set up our environment, and go ahead and run our crew. So let's speed through this. The first thing we need to do is go ahead and create a new Python environment that includes all of the dependencies that we had set up earlier. Here's how we do that. We are going to be using Conda, and we are going to be creating a new environment that's going to store all of our different dependencies for this project. So what I'm going to do is create a new Conda environment with the name CrewAI LangGraph, just so I know what this environment is for. And I'm going to specify the Python version. I'd like to go with 3.11. So I'm going to go ahead and kick that off. And it'll create a new Python environment for me. And one thing you might notice is like, what is Conda? Well, Conda is just a tool that allows you to quickly create these Python environments. If you don't have Conda on your system, definitely just recommend watching a quick Conda for Linux or Conda for Windows tutorial, and it'll walk you through the complete setup. It's super simple, but eventually you'll get to a state to where you can start running Conda on your machine, and it's going to make managing all your Python environments so much easier. Fantastic. So once we have actually created our new environment, we can actually dive into it and start using it. And right now you'll notice I'm in my base Python environment, and I can easily switch over to my new environment by typing in this command. And once I've done that, you'll notice it no longer says base, it actually says the name of the new environment I just created, which is super cool. So what we can do next is we need to go off and install all of these different requirements inside of our new Python conda environment. So we can do that with saying pip install. So go off and install packages using pip. And I'm specifically trying to install packages and the specified version numbers inside of my requirements.txt file. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. And this will take, once again, just a few seconds to go off and run and install everything inside of our project. Once we have done that, we should be good to go and run our crew. And I'm just gonna go ahead and say before we actually run it, whenever you go to run Python main.py, whenever you run this, which is gonna kick off our LangGraph workflow and go kick off our crew, whenever I ran this the first time, what happened to me is it said, hey, we need to access your Gmail account. And if you remember, we went off and created all of those new configuration files, and we now give our local crew access to Gmail. So you're gonna have to do that normal thing when like you use a new application saying like, hey, do you allow Google or this tool to access Google? The answer is yes, because in our case, we want our local tool to access our emails so we can start pulling them out, pulling them down and writing draft emails. So you're not going to see that screen here because I've already accepted it in the past, but just notice on your end, you're going to have to press yes, I consent and allow Google to start writing emails for me. So I'm going to go ahead and kick it off just so you can see this tool in action. So we're going to start running our crew. Going to go off, check our emails, and you can start to see the draft emails that I have typed up and sent to myself as dummy emails. So you can see, yep, our tasks are working. Well, let's start from the get-go. We went ahead and pulled down our draft emails from Google, and then from there, this actually, because we found emails, if you remember LangGraph, we found emails, fantastic. They're new emails, so let's go off and actually start filtering them. From there, we're going to pull out the core information, so you can see, hey, go filter these emails. Fantastic. Well, we've now analyzed all of these, and here's the snippet for each one of these emails. Well, now that we've done that, we need to pull out the core pieces of information from each email. So that was our email action specialist. So like I said, you can kind of see how all of it's coming together now. So we found these were the filtered emails. Now we're going to pull out the key pieces of information from each one of those emails. So this is what it must include. And as you can see, we went ahead and here and actually start putting together exactly what is needed to go off and eventually write our emails. And that's what is exactly going to happen in the next step. So now we're going to go over to the email response writer. So that was the third step in our tool. Now that we have all the information, we're going to go off and write it. So you can see that's exactly what's happening here. We're going to start Tavily, our tool that we set up, is going to go off and search like, what the heck is CrewAI? What the heck is LangGraph? And it actually found information on the internet. So it's not only just using local context, it's using the internet to help us write a response. And then from there, eventually we're going to go off and call the create draft, and that was that custom tool we created from Google. If you remember over here, this is our create draft tool. So it's using the tools we provided to it and actually typed up a nice email response. Thank you for your email. I've been looking forward to do this. It's awesome, so forth and so forth. And best Brandon, because I wrote the email. And it's going to just keep going. And then eventually, after typing up those emails and responses, we're going to get to the state to where like, yep, there's no more emails. I've already wrote draft emails, so I'm just going to go off and wait for 30 seconds. And I'm just going to continue the cycle over and over and over again. So all around, I hope you think this is super cool and you now have a new use case for using CrewAI, and you have also leveled up your CrewAI game because you now know how to use LangGraph intelligently to go ahead and manage state and trigger off your crew in a special way. So I hope you guys have really liked seeing how everything connects, and I know it's a little bit longer. I really hope you guys really enjoyed and learned a ton today. But that's a wrap for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed learning about CrewAI and LangGraph and setting up your own email automation tool. And just as a few quick recaps, if you got stuck at all during this video, or if you just want to meet other like-minded AI developers, you're definitely going to check out that free Skool community I just created for you guys. And outside of that, you can download the free source code below. Just click the link down in the description. And finally, I have a ton of other AI-related content on this channel, so you'll definitely want to check out any of those videos after watching this one, and you probably definitely want to check out the videos that YouTube is recommending right after this, wherever it's at on the screen. But enough of that. Hope you guys have a great day. Talk to you soon. See ya.